In this lesson, the target states, I can find the volume of prisms and cylinders. The only vocabulary word in this lesson is volume, but it's a big one. It starts with trying to remember how to find the area of some figures like a square or a rectangle or a circle. To find the area of a square, you multiply its length times its width. To find the area of a circle, you multiply pi times r squared. So you need one of the radiuses. You need a radius. You square it and multiply it times pi, and it gives you the surface area of the circle. This is because a cylinder has a face that's a circle, and a square, or a prism, has a face that's either a square or a rectangle. So we find the area of that face by using length times width, and we multiply it by its height, because we want to know how many of those squares fit inside it. Let's take a closer look at that. Any three-dimensional figure, like prisms or cylinders, can be filled completely with congruent cubes and parts of cubes. The volume of a three-dimensional figure is the number of cubes it can hold. Each cube represents a unit of measure called a cubic unit. To find the volume of a rectangular prism, you can count cubes or multiply the lengths of the edges. So this rectangular prism below has three faces, all of different lengths, 4, 2, and 2. It's made up of cubes. You can see them here. So how many cubes would fit into this rectangular prism? Well, if it's 2 units wide and 4 units long, one floor of this is 8 cubes, but it's 2 units tall. So it would be a total of 16 cubes that fit in it, 16 cubic centimeters. We found that by measuring length times width times height. That's the formula to find the volume of a prism. But to find the area of the base, we multiply the length times the width. So if we find the area of the base and we multiply it by the height, we have the volume. So the formula for a volume of a prism, V, is the area of its base times its height, h. V equals BH, where B is the area of the base. The volume V of a prism is the area of its base times its height. So for an example 1, using a formula to find the volume of a prism, like a cereal box. So can you find the volume of this figure? Well, it's 8 inches wide, 2 inches deep, and 12 inches tall. So what's the area of the base of the cereal box? Well, it's 2 times 8, or 16. We have to multiply that times the height. So we would have multiplied 2 times 8 times 12, which would be 16 times 12, which is 160 plus 32, or 192. So the volume of this cereal box would be 192 cubic inches. In that first example, with the cereal box, the face of the cereal box is a rectangle. So we just used length times width and multiplied it by the height to find the volume. This figure, however, is a different kind of prism, and it's got a triangular face. So if we want to find the area of this triangle, we have to do a little more work. We're still going to use V equals BH, only B might need another step. To find the area of this triangle, we'd multiply 3 times 4 to get 12. We'd have to then divide it by 2 to get 6, because area of a triangle is 1/2 times the base times the height. So it's 3 times 4 times 1/2, or half of whatever I get when I multiply the base times the height. So the base of a triangle is B equals 1/2 times 4 times 3, which is 6, like I just said. And its height, or how long it is 15. So to find the volume of this prism, we would do 1/2 times 3 times 4 times 15. I probably like to think about it like this. I'm going to do all that and I'm going to divide it by 2. Because this prism is half of a rectangular prism, one that has a rectangular face. 3 times 4 is 12, times 15 is 180, and 180 divided by 2 is 90. So this is 90 cubic inches. Oops, need a 3 there. So this shipping container could contain 90 cubic inches. So besides prisms, there are cylinders that have circular faces. The volume of a cylinder is the area of its base times its height. And to find the area of the base, you have to find the area of a circle and multiply it by how tall it is. So using a formula to find the volume of a cylinder, we need a couple of pieces of information. A can of shoe polish is shaped like a cylinder. Find its volume to the nearest tenth using 3.14 for n. So we're just going to use the number 3.14, not pi on our calculator to do this one. So let's find the area of the circular face of this cylinder. Well, they gave us a diameter of 8. That means the radius is 4. They're trying to be tricky. So this area of the circle is pi r squared, or 3.14 times 4 squared. And we have to multiply that times the height of the cylinder, 5. So if we find the area of the surface of this cylinder and multiply it times 5, we'd have the volume of the cylinder. So order of operations, 4 squared is first, 4 squared is 16, so 3.14 times 16 times 5. I can multiply 16 times 5 first. I'd get 50 plus 30, or 80. So it's 3.14 times 80. And I just used my calculator to figure out it's 251.2 cubic centimeters. It's important I note I have to give the right units. Since it's volume, it needs cubic units. Otherwise, your answer would not be correct. If it was square units, you'd be saying your answer is area, but because it's volume, your answer needs to be in cubic units to represent volume. Okay, sometimes they blend the two together. They call that a composite figure. So if we had a composite figure, it means we have a prism and a cylinder, and they're attached. So to find the volume of a composite figure, we're going to combine two formulas. First formula to find the volume of the prism, second formula to find the volume of a cylinder. So if we wanted to find the volume of this composite figure, we'd find the volume of the prism, which is 7 times 4 times 5. We would add that to pi r squared h. Pi r squared is the area of the surface of the cylinder times the height. So it does give us a radius of 2, so it's pi times 2 squared times 3. The area of the cylinder. So if I do all this and combine them, I'd have the area of this composite figure. 7 times 4 is 28. 28 times 5 is 140 cubic feet. So the prism part of this composite figure is 140 cubic feet. Now for the area of the cylinder part. So it's pi times 4 times 3. 2 squared is 4, times 3 is 12. So if I do pi times 12 over on my calculator, give me 1 second, I get 37.6 cubic feet. If I add those up, 177.6 cubic feet for the volume of this composite figure. Okay, now can you put it all together? You try. Click pause and try these 3 problems in your notebook. Click play to check your work. Notice I left an equation for volume, which is a little different than the equation they've been presenting, and the equation for the volume of a cylinder. Number 1 is a prism. It's got a rectangular face. Number 2 is also a prism, but it has a triangular face. And number 3 is a composite figure. So click pause, try these 3 problems, and when you're ready, click play and I'll review. Good luck. Number 1. The area of the base of this would be 8 times 6, or 48. I'd have to multiply it times the height to find how many layers tall it is. So the area to find volume of this prism is 8 times 6 times 5. Inches times inches times inches, 8. I would do 5 times 6 first and get 30. Because I can do 8 times 30 a little more easily. 8 times 30 is 240 cubic inches. So I would have to say this. If you did not have cubic inches in your answer would be incorrect, because you weren't representing the fact that it was volume. There are 240 cubic inches in this nicely wrapped present. Number 2, it's a prism with a triangular face. So when I find the volume of it, I have to cut it in half, because it's half of a prism with a rectangular face. So it's 5 times 10 times 20, and I'm going to cut that in half. Multiply it by 1/2 or divide it by 2. 5 times 10 is 50. 50 times 20 is 1,000. (1,000) divided by 2 is 500. So the volume of this prism would be 500 cubic millimeters. Now the composite figure. We're going to put 2 formulas together and add what we get. So to find the volume of the rectangular prism, I'd multiply 7 times 6 times 3. 7 times 6 is 42, times 3 would be 120 plus 6 would be 126 cubic meters for the volume of the prism part of this. For the cylinder part, the radius is 2 meters. So it's pi times 2 squared times how tall the cylinder is, 5. 2 squared is 4. 4 times 5. So pi times 20. So I went over to my calculator, plugged it in, and I got 62.8. 62.8 cubic meters. I used 3.14. So if you used the button pi, you might have a slightly different answer, as long as it's in the ballpark. So I have to add up 126 and 62.8. So the 8's going to come down. Does the decimal. 6 plus 2 is 8. 6 plus 2 is 8. And the 1 comes down. So 188.8. So the volume of this is 188.8 cubic meters.